Hey team, welcome back to Spec. I've got my new cameraman Ted. Say hi Ted. Robin has come off her first round run and I can't be happier. We figured out through racing that she's got about the same power to weight ratio as what an MX-5 does. And so now it's time to squeeze a little bit more power into the old girl and see if we can go that little bit quicker. I've got some other changes that I want to make too, so come on, let's get into it. So you can see what I'm going to do easier. I've done a bit of a body cutaway. No, not really. This is the engine for faith. I'm lucky enough that it's sitting around, but it's an easy way that I can show you exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to try three things. I want the engine to spin a bit easier. I want the exhaust to get out a bit faster, and I'm hoping to force a bit more cold air in there. So to start off with, I'm going with an Underdrive harmonic balancer. So that'll drive the accessories less. But I'm not just going to do the harmonic balancer, because when Ford themselves used to run a production 6-cylinder motor back in the 90s, the EBSS, they used to run a bigger power steering pump pulley as well to increase its reliability during high RPM applications. So I've gone one of those too. And also a larger alternator pulley. And I'm hoping to remove the air conditioner compressor. We'll see how we go there. Now to get the exhaust gases out faster, I've got a set of Pacemaker competition headers that'll go on. And then to put more air in, I'm gonna try and feed air from somewhere, but I haven't figured that out yet. I started by removing the air intake snorkel and then the fans. So I could cheat and give myself room, I pulled the radiator too. Because I was by myself, I used my impact gun to remove the harmonic balancer bolt. While I was there, I put some tension on the belt and did the same with the alternator pulley nut. Then it was time to remove the belt and the alternator pulley. Then using a puller specifically designed for the Barra motor, remove the harmonic balancer. And unbolted the idler pulley and the belt tensioner. I knocked the caps off the power steering and water pump pulleys. Then using a power steering pump pulley removal kit, took off the power steering and water pump pulleys. Last but not least, I removed the AC compressor and then the bracket that holds it onto the block. While I had the balancer out, there has been a slight leak from the timing cover seal. So while I had the space, I pried the old one out and gently tapped a new one into place. Before I install it all, I just want to do a quick side-by-side of everything. So you can see the bigger power steering pump pulley, the water pump pulley is about the same size, the alternator pulley is bigger, the harmonic balancer is smaller, and then I've got this AC delete bracket. So that is heaps lighter than what the actual air conditioner compressor is. So that was never hooked up anyway. That was just pretty much another idler in the system, but that's gone now and we're going to try and fit this one here. Then we've got the new tensioner and idler pulleys that are the same size, but they come in the kit with the powerbond harmonic balancer. Now the balancer also comes with a shorter belt because of the smaller size of the harmonic balancer. Now, but because I've gone bigger on the alternator and the power steering pump, I'm not sure whether that belt's going to fit or whether a standard belt will fit, but I'll figure that out along the way. This time, working from bottom to top, I installed the new harmonic balancer and tightened it with my cheater wrench. Then I fit the new alternator pulley, water pump, and power steering pump pulley. Next was the idler pulley and the tensioner, complete with a new pulley too. Now the water pump would be spinning slower due to the smaller harmonic balancer. I've never had any overheating issues, even though I'm still using the factory thermostat and EL radiator. But I thought it'd be a good opportunity to install a colder thermostat just to make sure I didn't induce any issues. Next was to fit my AC delete bracket, but that didn't go to plan. Alright, so I'm calling this AC delete bracket a bust. I've mucked around with it for a little bit, but there's too many concessions. Like, you can make it work, but there's too many concessions to make me happy. So the studs would only go into the bottom slots, so I've put it loosely in here. then I would have to use the manifold support bracket bolt, which is smaller for the top one, so that lines up all right. But then when it tightens up at all the way forward, well, it's probably hard to see, the belt is actually out a little bit, so if you move it any far forward, it crashes on the block here, so then you need to space it out. And because it doesn't have the right thread in that stud where the bolt was for the manifold support bracket, I'd have to completely manufacture something up. Then nail in the coffin as well is there's a little dunk on the block here that is between the two bottom studs that also it's fouling on, so you can't actually tighten it all the way up to the block, so you'd have to space it out sufficiently to clear that, get this far enough forward. You could probably put the intake support bracket back in, but then it crashes on here too. And the absolute final nail in the coffin is every other pulley on here is black and this one is silver. So I've decided sometimes you just got to cut your losses, and I'm going to do something different here, and I'm going to pull this one off. Tail between my legs, I moved on to the exhaust manifold. I removed the heat shield, disconnected the O2 sensor, and removed it. Then removed the remaining manifold bolts. With the manifold loose, I disconnected the downpipe from the exhaust, then pulled it out as one big piece. Before I chuck it in, I'll do a little bit of a over-under, I guess you used to call it. So yeah, you can see how much bigger the tubes are on the headers, and I'm going to have to get a little bit of pipe made to move back to the exhaust that's already on there. To make it easier to install, rather than use the bolts, I sorted out myself some studs for the header. After applying a bit of anti-seize to the threads, I fit them to the head. Once they were all in, I tightened and torqued them down. With the new gasket in place, I fed in the header and bolted it down. I had pre-fit the O2 sensor, so I connected it as well and restrained the cable so it wouldn't come in contact with the header pipes. My new air conditioner delete bracket has arrived, and here's a bit of a comparison side by side. Look at this beautiful black pulley. That makes me so much happier. But the other thing that I didn't like about this one as well was that it was slotted, where this one isn't. And with the car being a race car, doing high RPM, I was a bit worried about this one moving around, but this one will never do that. This new AC delete bracket bolted directly in, and I could test using the original belt to determine if this was the correct length. Then after a quick trip to the parts store, I installed a brand new belt. Now it's time to reinstall the radiator, the hoses, and the fans. Okay, so now the engine can spin a bit freer and the exhaust gases can leave a bit faster, but I want to get more cold air into the airbox. My old boy, he had a BF XR6 and I talked him into getting the F6 snorkel and came with the lower part of the airbox. You could buy them new at the time. And he said that it made the car more punchy and gave a better fuel economy too. But I'm going to do a snorkel into the airbox. Now normally that would come out of the front, but there's actually not a lot of room, especially like there's a relay block there that I'd need to move and that sort of thing. But what I do have is I have an EB lower airbox, which for all intents and purposes looks the same, except for there's two bolts here instead of the EL has one bolt and then like a pin. So hopefully that swaps over, but at least that way I can test my theory with this one. But what I'm going to do is actually feed the air in through the bottom. So the air will actually come up through where guys normally put like intercooler piping. And then I'll put a big snorkel on the front bumper. So after opening the airbox, I removed the K&N filter, unbolted the lower airbox and took it out. Then I put in the lower airbox I'd already drilled the lower hole into. Actually, this is where I should make a clarification. This airbox did come out of an EB, but it was a V8 Fairmont, and that's why the lower airbox was the same. After marking where I needed the hole, I removed the airbox again and drilled it through. Now it was time for installing the airbox again and checking the alignment of the holes. Next it was time to remove the bumper and install a snorkel. At the same time I was trying to cut down this crash structure to make some room, but during that process I came up with another idea. I've had the bumper on and off a couple of times and I've settled on my intake being right here. The problem that I had though was that that structure that I was trying to chop away, I could never chop away enough of it, and it was actually really heavy. So what I decided to do is build myself some really dodgy aluminium bunker brackets. So they'll hold on to where the factory positions were. So hopefully with those, some cable ties, some race tape and hopes and dreams, the front bumper will stay on. Now it's time to put it back. With my whole position sorted, it was time to hack a hole in the bumper. After liberally applying Sikaflex to the back of the snorkel, I mounted it to the bumper and then gave it some more Sikaflex. Finally, I cleaned up the mess with a shop towel and some isopropyl alcohol. After letting it set overnight, I mounted the front bumper. Cable tied and race taped the corners and bolted up my dodgy brackets. The front bumper's back on. Now the other thing that I'd put back in as well is the radiator duct. It's one of the most important bits in there because it makes sure that the air actually goes through the radiator rather than getting spilt underneath the car. But it has some really nice clips to the body at the top of it, but there's nothing holding it at the bottom. So I've cable tied that to the bumper and then the radiator duct back to the car. So that's actually now semi become a structural bit as well. And then we've got my new cold air duct that goes in through the bumper, runs up into the engine bay, and then I've put the ducting so it nudges a bit towards where the inlet is. So now all I need to do, close the airbox, put the radiator pipe back in, fill it up with coolant, bleed it, and it's good to go under the bonnet. Then we move on to something else. Now it's time to address my driver's seat. Like, it is a bit old, you know, the old wobbly bobbly. So I've got to pull that out because I've got another seat to go in, which I'll show you in a minute. But I'm not going to just pull that seat out. I'm going to pull out the passenger seat too, and the center console and the carpet, all in an effort to try and do some weight reduction. I started by removing the driver's seat, the passenger seat, and the center console. To remove the center console properly, you need to remove the dash plastic as well. But when I had the dash plastic out while wiring up my fuel system upgrade, I noticed that the plastic tabs from the console had already been broken, so I didn't worry about it. After unbolting the bottom of the seat belts, I removed the scuff guards to be able to release the carpet. After a bit of fighting with the carpet, I realized that there was another plastic bar holding it down over the floor vent. But after I removed that, I could wrestle it out. I took off the floor vent and removed the sound deadening around the transmission tunnel. Look how nice that white paint is under there. After a quick vacuum on the driver's side floor, I fed in the new seat and bolted it down. We've got a new driver's seat. I'm a little bit disappointed I didn't get a fixed back one because the base is nice and sturdy, but the back's still got a bit of wobble in it, but that's going to be a million times better than the stocky that we used to have in there before. So all I've got left now is finish cleaning up the other side, and there's some sound deadening at the front that I want to get rid of. And then as well, these driver's side doors still have the speakers and the sound deadening and the wiring harnesses and the door locks and everything in them. I'm going to get rid of that too. I wanted to stiffen the front suspension. After taking a couple of measurements, I loosened the coilover collars, unbolted the upright to the upper control arm, and then after loosening the upper shock bolts, undid the lower shock bolt. Thankfully, help had arrived for the day and we removed the shock. Then it was time to disassemble it on the bench. I'd actually ordered 2 different stiffer spring rates, but they both came in a box together and they were indistinguishable from each other. Same height, diameter, coil diameter, and number of coils. So we used a super scientific method of bouncing on them to determine the stiffest to put in. But to avoid confusion in the future, I put 1 dot on the original spring, 2 dots on the slightly stiffer ones, and 3 dots on the stiffest ones. Then it was time to put it back together and throw it back in the car. When I installed the cold air induction, I lightened the front bumper by removing the crash structure. So I thought this was a good time to lighten the rear bar too. Started by removing the tape and at the same time some of my beautifully laid paint. Then undid the bar mounts in the boot and pulled off the bumper. Then I removed the bumper mounts from the bar, and after taking out some screw bits, removed the crash structure. Then my helper and I went to bending some more aluminium bar. Okay, so what we've done is we've pulled the crash structure out of the back of the bumper, and we've used that as a template to make a new aluminium bracket to replace it. So it'll take a bit of mass out of it, and still using the factory actual bumper mounts, but in the whole process, found out that where the crash structure actually mounts to the bumper, the plastic is actually cracked. So now I'm trying to weld it all back together with a bit more Sikaflex. So hopefully it all sticks together. Again, after letting it set overnight, fitting new quick release clips, and now by myself again, I offered up the rear bar. Good time to thank my apprentice for the day. I never would have got done what we did without you. Thanks, mate. After I bolted and clipped the bumper in place, I quickly cleaned the sides and installed some new race tape. With all my jobs done, now is time to take it for a quick drive, open headers and all. I took a bit of time to measure how much weight I'd taken out of it. There was 6 kilos of carpet, 9 kilos of sound deadening of speakers, 8 kilos of bumper crash structure, 6 kilos of center console, 17.5 kilos of passenger seat, and 7 kilos of AC compressor. What I didn't measure was exhaust manifold versus the header, but there definitely would have been a few kilos in there too. Okay team, well that's it. Hopefully we've given it a bit more power, we've taken a bit over 50 kilos out of it, and we've made some changes to the suspension. So hopefully she goes a bit quicker. She's not completely finished yet. If you would have noticed in the background, there's a new set of tyres, and I'm going to use those if the weather is favourable. It's going to the exhaust shop tomorrow to get a cat pipe made up to go back to the exhaust from the header, and it needs a bath. And then the other thing is, because of the heavier spring, the front ride height isn't quite right, so I'm going to go and adjust that now. But if you want to see how she goes, don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, there's more to going fast than going fast. I'll see you next time.